not in my faith, not in my words, not in that way.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا حي يا قيوم يا حي يا قيوم يا حي يا قيوم، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. يا حفيظ يا حفيظ يا حفيظ. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. It gives me great pleasure to be with you here tonight in Toronto. I was in Canada on a wedding invitation. One of our dear brothers from Edmonton wanted me to conduct his wedding, and it's not something normal that I attend weddings, but I had to respond to this brother's invitation despite coming back from the Gambia just after I arrived from the Gambia, within 24 hours of arriving from the Gambia, and on the way back I stopped here. So I arrived last night. I'm here for last night and tonight, inshallah, and I'm going back tomorrow. Sidi Nazim Baksh, who is a dear friend and brother, has asked if I can talk a little bit about a topic that relates to the issue of the modern man, and that has relation to my PhD project, which deals with tradition and modernity. So I'm hoping not to be too academic to the masjid crowd. I try to make it something that sounds like a story, blending together philosophy with religion, with tafsir, and a few other things together, inshallah ta'ala. Over 400 years ago, there were a few events in the European West that led to the dismantling or the appearance of voices that oppose the Catholic Church. Catholic Church in the European West has been in domination for a long time. And because of so many components, the Catholic Church started losing its grip on the society and on politics as well. And there were two essential events that mark the start of what we call the modern age. One of them is a political revolution that is called the French Revolution. The French Revolution introduced to the West what we call the ideas about how to run states and how to talk about freedoms and so on and so forth. And the other revolution was called the Industrial Revolution in England. These two revolutions were big events because what was after them was completely different from what was before them. And they were essentially about the empowerment of man. So human beings became the center of the world. The man has become the center of the world. And they have also introduced to us what we call disenchantment. Disenchantment means that there is no meaning in whatever we do in this world, and there is no implication for it in the hereafter. Because basically the modern West started to drift away from faith, from religion, and put it behind them and say, there is nothing called the hereafter. There is nothing called metaphysical world. There is nothing beyond this world, and everything is to do with here and now. So with these two big events, the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution in Britain, human society started to develop away from religion. And we can say that the human beings that existed from that time onwards could have been called the modern man. The modern man did not see the consequences of their action when those two revolutions emerged. But 300-400 years down the line, we can see the implications of what we call modernity. The implications of modernity did not stop at the level of an individual. It expanded to the level of the society. We have what we call today political structures that are known as nation state. nation state. And in the nation state, there is a central government. People are divided by borders. People have citizenship or nationality. Their loyalty is to the regime or to the land. The tribal system and the social structures that existed before the modern age are no more there. And in this modern civilization as well, we have so much focus on the importance of human beings. And the importance of human beings means that it is human beings that decide for themselves what they want to do, what they want to be, how they want to be. And with that in mind, anything that comes from God or comes from revelation had to be rationalized by humans for it to make sense. And as you all know, a few hundred years ago, the West, the modern West, decided to explore the rest of the world, so they ended up colonizing different parts of what was known as the Muslim world. So the Portuguese, for example, went to Indonesia, and others went to India, and others went to Africa, and others went to North Africa, and so on and so forth. And now in this post-colonial world, we have new societies that are ruled by something else that is called globalization. So the world is one village. What happens in Japan has an implication in Canada, and what happens in Europe has an implication in Saudi. And in the last couple of years, I'm just jumping decades, in the last couple of years we've witnessed that new invention or that new phenomena called COVID, which has changed the face of the world. In a couple of years, people's movements have changed. They were unable to move as freely as they used to be, and everything else had to be reconditioned. Now, this society that we live in has problems. Big problems. Of course, these problems essentially go back to the early days of modernity, the early days of modernization. And one of those big problems, of course, these problems have, the Quran has a response to those problems. And tonight we're not going to give detailed solutions, but we're going just to kind of brainstorm with each other, inshallah. So one of those problems is we have found that we live in a fragmented society. Modern society is a fragmented society. And what do I mean by fragmented society? Traditional societies have big structures called tribes or extended families. Modern society depends on what we call the nucleus family, father and mother. And because there is no support for the father and the mother, they had to themselves go out and work. And when they had to go out and work, and the children find no one to take care of them, they had to be sent to schools, right? They had to be sent to schools. And when they're sent to schools, it is now the state that dictates what can be taught and what cannot be taught. It is now the state that can tell what a child should be and what a child should not be. So in this modern society, the breaking of the social structures into small families has impacted morality and has impacted generations and has impacted virtue and has impacted loads of other things. But it didn't even stop there, because even the concept of nucleus family has been under attack for a few years now, as you all know. So the very concept of the family has become broken. So people nowadays are talking about, or for decades now have been talking about, the traditional concept of marriage. What is the traditional concept of marriage? It's challenged, isn't it? So that has also become fragmented. And then you go further and you realize that even the individual, the human being, is himself or herself fragmented. So people talk about identity. What is my identity? Who am I? Right? And you look around and you find that human beings don't know who they are. So even something as simple as pronouns. that we used to talk to each other, that has become under attack, that people don't know what pronoun to use when they talk to each other. That is what we call extreme fragmentation. Extreme fragmentation. And what we call the institutionalization of doubt. So what happened is, in modern society, people are extremely doubtful. They're doubtful of their family, they're doubtful of their faith, they're doubtful of their own selves. They don't know who they are. They don't know what do they want. They don't know how can they achieve happiness. This extreme doubt and this extreme skepticism has contributed to the fragmentation of man. So let's sum this up. And we say that one of the biggest problems of the modern human beings is fragmentation. Is what? Is fragmentation. You go to work and you come to the masjid and you have your own family and you have your other engagements, and you are cut in between these. You are so fragmented that you don't know how can you fit within all your duties and do them in a proper way. So one of the biggest problems of today's society is fragmentation. Another problem of the modern society is it's being devoid of meaning. So what do we do? And why do we do what we're doing? So things like charity, things like giving time to people who are in pain and in trouble, things like giving time to our extended family, things like volunteering, things like service, have lost their meaning in face of selfishness and extreme materialism. Human beings have become completely devoid of meaning, and because of that they started looking for meaning in other things, like drugs, for example, like pornography, like extreme ways of satisfaction of desires, extreme ways of satisfaction of the self, and finally things like self-harm and committing suicide, because people are unable to realize that life has a meaning and has a value in itself. We look around and we realize one of the problems of the modern society as well is that it's an extremely secular society. And when we talk about secularism, we do not mean, as people might think, separating religion from the state. That is not what secularism is. We mean by secularism separating the human being from any purpose and cutting your life in between the sacred and the non-sacred. So for example, as Muslims, you look around and you find that there are Muslims who have no problem whatsoever running a shop where they're selling haram, or leading a life where they are surrounded by haram, but yet they come and donate to the masjid. They run a life which is completely, or you find a sister, for example, who leads a life not wearing hijab, not observing her fara'id, and at the same time when she comes to salah, she just puts her hijab and prays. That's a secularism, if anything else, because that comes from the concept, from thinking that my life inside the mosque and my life outside the mosque are two separate things, right or wrong. Many Muslims live with that. Or you find a person who does not mind starting a business completely engulfed in riba and dealing with riba, and then at the same time they pray 5 times a day and they have a big beard and they will eat halal, for example. In fact, you find that people looking for solutions for their problems that are caused by observance of the religion. By observance of the religion. So religion is not a priority. It is taking it out of your box and fulfilling these duties that is the priority, regardless of how you do that. So people are no more looking for what Allah wants to say to them. They're looking for justification of what they want Allah to say to them. They're looking for a solution within the faith to give them appeasement that they are doing what they want to do. And that's what we call secularism. seeing that the sacred is inside the mosque. Outside the mosque, I can live the life that I want. One of the biggest problems of the modern society as well is the extreme false claim of I know. Human beings are being told that they are free, that they are the center of the world, and that they are the measure of all things, and they should not accept anything unless it is rational, extremely rational. And if they're told that as masses, and the level of masses, then we lose authority. So teachers, scholars, scholarship has no place in the society anymore. Oftentimes, when people ask a question and you need to tell them what is halal and haram, they don't want to listen to that. Why don't they want to listen to that? Because they say, why should it be you who's telling me this? In fact, living in the West and even in the Middle East, you can see that people don't know the difference between a scholar, a speaker, an imam, and just anybody else. Anyone who can come and give me a khutbah in the masjid that must be a scholar. Malik rahimahullah ta'ala said, I have seen in this mosque 70 people whose character is so righteous that you can seek rain by mentioning their name, but I didn't write a single sentence of knowledge from any of them because they were not specialists. Our predecessors had this very clear differentiation between righteousness and knowledge, between scholarship and lack of scholarship. It was very clear in the traditional societies that there is hierarchy where the higher commands the lower. The more expert leads the less experienced. But in the modern society, it's all leveled down. That there is no difference between the ones who know and the ones who do not know. The ones who are qualified and the ones that are not qualified. So there is this big claim of what? Of knowledge. Today, it is often the case that someone says, my qualification is that I have 1.5 million followers on TikTok. Well, I'm not going to talk about Facebook because that's outdated now. Like not Twitter even, because that's kind of like an old fashioned. People talk about like more modern things. If you want to spread knowledge today, it has, unless you do that through Facebook and social media, no one is willing to actually entertain any class or something like that. By the way, this has invaded even our circles, our spiritual circles. You'll find people, if we do a mawlid here, you will find the masjid packed with people. But if we do a class of knowledge, serious knowledge, people will be there first day, then next day, and then third day, and afterwards they'll start dwindling. Like by the end, you'll be lucky if you have like 3 or 4 people sticking around. That's the reality, right? So, and when you ask people, like, is this topic something that you already know? And they say, no, we don't know it. So why are you not attending? They will say, well, I've got loads of other things in my plate. I have other engagements. Right, but you need this for your deen. You need this for the safety of your deen. You need this to be a functional Muslim, and so on and so forth. So we live in a society where there's extreme claim of what? Of I know everything. And we live in a society where things, if they do not make sense to me, to my own mind, I reject them. One of the things, for example, one of the fiqh issues that we always discuss. Where there is ijma' between the 4 madhabs, by the way, and this might sound a little bit irritating to some people, is women traveling without a mahram, right? It's not allowable according to the 4 schools for women to travel without a mahram, with the exception of Hajjul Fard. Hajjul Fard. A woman can travel without a mahram only for Hajjul Faridah. She can travel with a trustworthy company of women. And if she is traveling from a non-Muslim land to a Muslim land for the safety of her faith. Besides, that is not allowable. The official view of all the 4 schools is not allowable. But you will find people arguing back about that and saying, well, but ya Shaykh, there are some necessities of the time. But ya Shaykh, it's about safety of the road. Well, who says it's about safety of the road? That's your interpretation of the law. You're saying that it is because of the safety of the road. Allah did not say that. That's your own understanding of the reason. That's your own reasoning of the law. But that's not what the law says. Well, and the reality is, even if the law, who says that the roads are safe? If a woman is traveling and stopping over in another country, she's not safe. Anything can happen to her. And it's not about physical safety. It's about emotional safety. It's about loads of other layers of reasons beyond the law. But people follow their hawa and they don't want to listen to this. So much so that the fuqaha and the ulama have sometimes to kind of blend in with the masses in order to please the masses. And unfortunately, these are some of the problems of the modern society. Right? There is no hierarchy in a modern society. There is extreme materialism. Our modern societies are judged by, they're ruled by extreme materialism. We measure everything by money. We measure everything by what benefit will I get. So the Quran looks at all of these things and deals with them. And it doesn't deal with them by giving a solution, but by highlighting the problem. Because we should not expect all the time that the Quran tells us you need to do this and you fix it. You know, sometimes a doctor discovers your medical problem, and by that discovery, he's not telling you, oh, here is the medication. No, he's telling you, this is what you need to take care of. Just beware of that. You know, you go to the mechanic and they say, by the way, there's a problem with your car. Here is the problem with your car. There's no way that you can fix this. This is beyond fixing, but please take care. And always carry an extra tire. Or always like keep an eye on this, because something, when it gets to a specific level, you have to be very, very careful. So sometimes the Quranic solution, or the solution that faith gives us, is not there to save us from the problem, but to slow the decay. To slow down the decay. And we understand that man is created, and from the point he was created, there is loss. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Man is always in loss. We understand that the movement of that time moves forward, it doesn't move backward. Which means we cannot reinvent the wheel. We can never reinvent the wheel. Reviving what happened in the past is a fallacy, is a fantasy. All of those theories and Islamic kind of like theories that came to try to tell us that we can reinvent the golden era of Islam have proven to be a big failure, because that's not going to be the case. It's impossible. Otherwise, you are delaying the day of judgment. The day of judgment will have to come. But it's about how can we maintain the little that we have and survive through difficult times. This is what the Quran is telling us, and this is what the Quran is offering us at the time of modernity. So what is it that the Quran is telling us to do? How can we feel that wholeness? How can we face these problems? I mentioned that the first thing that we have as a disease of the modern society is extreme fragmentation. And extreme fragmentation comes because of various reasons. One of them is man does not know who he is. And the Quran tells us throughout, from the beginning all the way to the end, who is human being? Who are we? Well, how do we know who are we? We know who are we when we turn to the one who were there when we were not anything. So we look at Surah Al-Insan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هَلْ أَتَى عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ حِينٌ مِّنَ الدَّهْرِ لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا مَذْكُورًا. Truly there was a time when man was something unmentioned. So what is the point of asking a question like that or making a statement like that? Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us that there was a point where human beings were nothing? Well, do we really need to be reminded of that fact? Yes, we do. Because sometimes we forget that. And we claim that we have come from somewhere else, where we were apes sometimes, where we were monkeys some other times, where we have always existed and were mighty and strong all the time. So the Quran is telling us that there was a point when you did not even exist. There were a point where you something unremembered or unmentioned or of no value. And the one who has elevated you to your value and to your status as a human being is someone who is now telling you this is your identity. يا أيها الإنسان ما الذي غرك بربك الكريم يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم الذي خلقك فسواك فعدلك. What has deceived you, what has made you forget your Lord, your generous Lord who has created you? He has fashioned you, He has put you in proportion, made everything in you in proportion. So when you try to find your identity, you need to go to the one who has given you this identity so that you are not fragmented. So that you are not fragmented. It is only through this knowledge that human beings can feel as a whole. That a human being can feel a whole, an individual. And then when you go from the level of an individual to the level of the family, the Quran is clear about the role of men and women in the society. The role of a father and a mother and a child in the society. So much so that if these roles are being or going to be defined or redefined in a different way, that will cause disaster in the society. So when the role of women is being redefined in a way other than what the Quran has dictated, or the role of men is being redefined in a way that other than what the Quran has dictated, then what happens? The proportion that Allah has embedded in the society, that organic proportion, starts to collapse and dismantle. So you find that fragmentation. Why is it our families are fragmented? Because men and women are no more performing their jobs that Allah has created them for. And what jobs are they performing? They're performing other jobs that have been given to them by somebody else. Could be the United Nations, could be the government, could be activists, could be movements, could be this, could be that. It doesn't really matter who is giving them these new roles, but they are taking that from someone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows what roles they can actually play and what they are actually fit for. So when you try to empower children, for example, to become adults before they are really adults, you are not empowering the children. You are putting the whole family into shambles. You are putting the whole family into disaster. So redefining the roles in the society in a way other than that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created humans, has given, causes trouble. So how can we and causes that fragmentation in the family. So how can we re-maintain then, or kind of like work on that? A man has to play the role of a man. A woman has to play the role of a woman. A child has to play the role of a child. It's the parents who have to give the child their education, but not anybody else. When the role of the parents is taken away from them and replaced by the role of the state, then there will be a mess. When the husband's role is taken away and it's played by somebody else, it's a mess. When the mother's role is taken away and played by a maid or a carer or a nursery or anyone else, again, we're not saying that people should leave schools, but we're saying that mothers have to play the role of a mother, right? It's very important for the mothers to play the role of a mother. It's very important for the husband, the father, to play the role of a husband and the father. When these roles are kind of lost, we find that our families are broken down. Our families are dismantled. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks very clearly about the relations between men and women. الرجال قوامون على النساء. That men has this qawama. And qawama does not mean that they are above them. It means they have a form of mentorship and leadership and guidance which comes from standing up to virtue and being good. So when you have men who are corrupt, then they have no qawama. They don't stand up for that role. And when you have women who are trying to be masculine, they are assuming something that is not their role. When you have a problem of masculinity and femininity of the society, that we have a society that is suffering immensely from a masculinity problem, isn't it? We have a society that is suffering immensely from masculinity problem. We were talking earlier today about how many young people today who are married and they're not mature. Then you have high levels of divorce, high divorce rates. And you have women who do not, many young women and many young men enter into a marriage without knowing who they are and what do they want to be. And then 5-6 years down the line, they have a child. And that child does not know whom to turn to for some guidance. So the family breaks. So the Quran tells us clearly about the role of men and women in the society. And in order to help human beings deal with the fragmentation of the family, we need to re-identify these roles and go back to them. Be qualified to go back to them. So we need good men in the society. And we need good women in the society. And a good man is only a good man when he fulfills the duties that have been assigned to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And good women are good women only when they fulfill the roles assigned to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then they can be called tayyibun, righteous, good. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, at-tayyibuna lit-tayyibat. The righteous are for the righteous. Righteous women are for the righteous men. وَالْخَبِيثَاتُ لِلْخَبِيثِينَ وَالْخَبِيثُونَ لِلْخَبِيثَاتِ. And the corrupt are for the corrupt. So when there is corruption in the family, it's not only in one side, it's in both sides. And then what would you expect from what is beyond that? So the Quran talks about that fragmentation that humans have, and the treatment of that is to know who you are. Go back to the Quran and see how does the Quran define human beings. What is a human being? How can you be a human being? And the Quran talks about the fragmentation of the family. And how can we deal with that? By understanding the roles that Allah has assigned for us in the Quran as men and women and children and adults and non-adults. And then the Quran talks about the roles we have in the society. So dealing with the fragmentation of the society. What can we do in order to help this society survive? So the Quran speaks about the avenues through which we can be charitable and good. The avenues through which we can save the society some trouble. We cannot save the society all the trouble, but some trouble. The Prophet ﷺ speaks extensively about places where we can do charity. We can be of service. We can guide. We can help others so that the society does not break. He said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when the day of judgment is upon you and you have a little plant, go ahead and plant it. Meaning, do not wait and leave the society that's falling apart, fall apart. Try to do something, even if it is very little. We can practice that at the level of our community, at the level of our masjid. So that is the problem of fragmentation. The Quran speaks about that extensively. The Prophet ﷺ teaches us that each and every one of us has a responsibility. We call it khuwaisa. So it's not khassa from the word khas, special. It's khuwaisa, your small circle of responsibility. You can't go to a larger circle of responsibility unless you have fulfilled the small circle of your responsibility. We say charity begins at home. You can't be active in the masjid while your own children are going astray. You have to spend time with your children. You have to spend time with your grandchildren. You have to spend time with your spouse. You talk to your own spouse. You talk to your wife. You talk to your children. SubhanAllah, some years ago there was some problem in the UK with some little girl running away and joining ISIS. And when she wanted to come back to the UK, actually, even before that, when some media outlets went to the father to ask, like, why did your daughter run away and went to ISIS? The father said, which one of them? The father didn't even know how many children does he have. Seriously, he didn't know Why? Because he was spending half the year in the UK and half the year somewhere else. Because he would spend the winter out, and he doesn't know how many kids does he have and whereabouts are they. The Prophet ﷺ told us that it is enough sin of a person to neglect those who are his responsibility. Like that's enough. If you neglect your children, if you neglect your duties, if you neglect your family, if you don't fulfill that responsibility, that's enough sin. You don't need to incur sins from somewhere else. Like on the day of Qiyamah, that will be enough big heavy load that you will have to face the consequences of that. You don't need to incur sins from somewhere else if you have neglected them. So that's just a little insight into dealing with fragmentation. That we need to focus on our khuwaisa, our direct circle of responsibility. Spend time with your own family, spend time with your own mother and father, visit them, enjoy their company, give good quality time to your own children, and don't make excuses that I am busy. As much as you're responsible to feed your children and to make sure that there is food on the table, you have a responsibility to talk to them and spend time with them. Food is not everything. Food is not everything. Sometimes children do not need food. They just need someone to listen to them or someone to talk to them. And this is an important thing. This is as important as your salah, by the way. It is as important as your salah. It is as important as your zakah. It is as important as your hajj. It is as important as the arkan of the deen. Why? Because it's saving someone who will hang on your neck on the day of judgment and say, this man, this individual has neglected me. So social media is pulling our times away from us and make us in no place to take care of our own families, and that's a problem. When we look at the other problem, which is that extreme doubt, that extreme skepticism that's spreading in the society, and that extreme secularism, how does the Quran deal with it? The Quran tells us all the way through that we should perceive this life and the next as a whole unit of dedication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We read at the end of Surah Al-An'am, قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Say my prayer, my rituals, my life and my death are all for Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one whom you observe and be dedicated to outside the masjid as you are inside the masjid. If we look through the books of fiqh, for example, we'll find that the books of fiqh rule our life. From tahara, purity and purification, to salah, to zakah, to marriages, to divorces, to khul', to dhihar, to ila, to transactions with all forms of transactions. The Sharia, the fiqh, tells us what should we do when we have a business partnership falling apart. It tells us what we should do when we go to the supermarket. It tells us what we should do if someone has taken something that is not their right. How should we deal with that? In the same way as it tells us what should we do on the day of Eid. It tells us how should we resolve a moon sighting issue, in the same way as it tells us how do we resolve something to do with international politics, for example. The Sharia is all embracing and all encompassing, which is telling us that we cannot live a compartmental life, where you are a Muslim within this, but outside this you can do as you wish. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anh is known for having said, the one who does not learn the rulings of buying and selling, he will definitely fall in riba. And it is quite surprising that many Muslims today fall into riba without knowing it. You will be surprised that Muslims, the biggest challenge of Muslims today is not the validity of their salah, is the validity of their earnings. And by the way, this is all connected. When you have a problem with your children being on the straight path, the first thing you should look at is, are you feeding them halal or haram? Well, but ya Shaykh, I'm not selling alcohol. Who said you're selling alcohol? Who told you that haram comes only when you sell alcohol? It can be a loan or something else that you are doing and it's haram. So what do I need to do? You need to make sure that your life is built on halal. The Prophet ﷺ gave like a very simple solution. Where is our du'as after every salah? Where is our du'as after Jum'ah? Where is our du'as in Ramadan? In Ramadan everyone is crying. But yet our du'as, we feel that nothing is happening and we stuck. What's the problem? He said to Saad ibn Mu'adh, أطب مطعمك تكون مستجاب الدعوة. Make sure that your food is clean. It's not that it's halal. No, make sure that your earnings are pure and clean. Your dua will be accepted. It's a very simple solution, but it's extremely difficult because you have to be very careful. In the same way as you're careful about the debts that are due to you, you have to be very careful about the money that comes into your pocket. You don't know. Ahmed ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah ta'ala, went to Mecca al-Mukarramah and he left his cup. He had like a utensil. He left it in someone's shop. And he came back and the man gave him another cup and he said, that's not mine. That's not mine. The man said to him, I know this is not yours. I was just testing you. Here is yours. He said, now I cannot trust you. How do I trust that you're giving me mine? You're lying to me. You take both of them. You take both of them. The other day someone asked me, they accumulated money from haram and they've decided to make tawbah and leave that. But they have debts from those days. Can they use the haram money to pay the debts and start fresh? I said, no. But they accumulated those debts when they had haram money. Yes, but those debts are now associated with you. If you want to do tawbah, you cannot cut corners. You cannot cut corners. If you have a problem with the foundations of your house, you have to kind of like redo the foundations, for example. You have to do a good job. Not a quick man's job. Not a hocus pocus job. And that hocus pocus job will not survive. So the Quran tells us that we have to live a life of coherence. And what do you mean by a life of coherence? That your inward and your outward are the same. We read very simply, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ, that you worship Allah as if you see Him. Well, that's inside the masjid and outside the masjid. That is in the market, that is in the hospital, that is in the mechanic, that is in this. Because if you do not see Him, if you can't carry that feeling, if you cannot carry that sense, then truly He sees you. So you have to bear in mind that you are not alone. You are not alone. So that materialism, that secularism is treated by bringing into our minds that Islam as a faith is something that you can practice inside and outside, at all levels, and that it's not going to be easy. Whoever says to you, it is going to be easy all the way through, no, it's not going to be easy. But we understand that it's not going to be easy, because who told you that this world is the final destination? It is not the final destination. There is no, who told you that there is security that this life will have to be extremely luxurious? It will not be extremely luxurious. If it was going to be extremely luxurious and it was to be given to people based on their righteousness, Allah would have given it to His prophets. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the lives of His prophets very difficult life. They had to undergo starvation and difficulty. They were ridiculed by others. People laughed at them. People called them names. People hit them and beat them. People killed them. Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam was killed. Allah said to His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَلَقَدْ كُذِّبَتْ رُسُلٌ مِّن قَبْلِكَ فَصَبَرُوا عَلَى مَا كُذِّبُوا وَأُوذُوا. Like so many prophets and messengers before you, they were denied and rejected. But they displayed patience because they know that the pleasure of this world is but a little. It's just a short journey. So that's a reality. So when we bring these meanings and that understanding to our minds, we'll not really worry too much about how and in what way the society is going to validate us. Because Muslims are all about validation now. How can I be validated by the society? How can I become popular? By watering down loads of things, by diluting loads of things. You don't have to become popular. You don't have to be popular on earth as long as you are popular in heavens. That's what really matters, right? You should make sure that you are known there. Whether you are known here or not known here, that's doesn't really actually an issue. And then finally, that extreme rationalization and claim that you know everything, that humans know everything, comes from a false notion of what knowledge is. We think that accumulation of information is what knowledge is. Ibn Ata'illah al-Secondary rahimahullah says, العلم النافع هو الذي ينبسط في الصدر شعاعه وينكشف به عن القلب قناعه. The real knowledge, beneficial knowledge, is one that spreads in the chest, its rays spread in the chest and dispel the veils from the heart. So you're able to recognize who you are. We find, if we look around us, you find a lot of academics and inventors and people who have contributed to the development of science. But those people live in this world and they earn all types of prizes and certificates and degrees, but they don't recognize the main purpose of their existence. They don't recognize who they are. They live in denial of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, Al-ilmu nafi' huwa ilmu al-qulub, that the real knowledge is knowing your heart, is knowing who you are, is knowing your own problems. The Quran speaks extensively about the notion of knowledge and what man thinks they know and how little that is in comparison to that of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alam ta'lam anna Allah lahu mulku as-samawati wal ard. Do you not know that Allah has the kingdom and the ownership of heavens and earth? That Allah knows your secret and your outward? That in fact the real knowledge that can build a society is to know what you should be and how you should be. It is knowing the defects of the soul and the defects of the heart and the defects of the nafs, and you work hard on that. We have people who have accumulated knowledge in their brain, but they use their knowledge to destroy others, at the level of individuals and at the level of states and at the level of organizations. The real knowledge is one that helps you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that helps you live in coherence with your own self. People have so much knowledge, have so much money, have so much accumulated loads of things. And you tell them, do you know the meaning of happiness? They don't know the meaning of happiness. They don't know the meaning of contentment. And therefore they live a life of difficulty. They live a life of extreme difficulty. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِ فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. That the one who turns away from remembering me, or from mentioning me, and from knowing me, and from knowing that I am his source of knowledge, then he will have a very difficult life, extremely difficult life. The Quran does not say that this life, in what way will this life be difficult, but it will definitely be difficult. It might have a lot of money, person might have a lot of things, but it will be a difficult life. As Abu Hassan Shadhili radiallahu anhu says, truly misfortunate the one who does not know you. And truly misfortunate the one who acknowledges your oneness and he does not accept your judgments. Who acknowledges your oneness, but he does not accept your judgments. So with that, human beings should always challenge what they think they know. We live in a society today that claims they know what is happening on the other side of the earth. But human beings don't know the secret of their own hearts. أَعِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ الْغَيْبِ فَهُوَ يَرَى. Do you know the unseen? Do you know what is going to happen to you in 5 days from now, in 5 minutes from now? Can you dispel and can you stop a calamity that is going to hit you? No one can do that, even the most powerful man in the world. And the Quran, in order to show us this meaning, the Quran speaks of many mighty and powerful individuals. Qarun and Namrud and Fir'aun and so many others who had different types and levels of power. Knowledge, money, they could do loads of things. In fact, when we speak of mighty businessmen of today, we have similar examples in the Quran. And those individuals were not helped when they claimed something that was not theirs. So as I started my talk with La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, that is a key to knowing who you are. You should know that you have no way to change your state and to change your life or to carry out any change in your being. And there is no way that you can have power to do that except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hawl is from tahweel, change. You cannot change the passage of your life. You cannot change the river of your life. You cannot change the hearts of your children. You cannot change the manners of your wife. You cannot change your own character. And you will not have ability or power to do that. There might be a change coming your way, but you cannot have a power over it except through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to see the truth as truth and enable us to follow it. May He subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to see falsehood as falsehood and enable us to avoid it. اللهم طهرنا من كل وصف يخالف وصف العبودية التامة لك وارزقنا حسن الأدب معك ومع نبيك ومع عبادك الصالحين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Not in my name, not in